Hi there, it's Katie from your favorite podcast, There's No Business Like, and I am so excited to see you at the upcoming Midwest Arts Expo. So excited, in fact, that I have already started packing my mom bag with all the conference must-haves. Charger cords, notepads, Tide pens for Kevin, Liquid IV, Kleenex, granola bars, water bottles, business cards, headphones, microphones. Wait, you also don't pack microphones in your conference suitcases? Well, I do, because I will be joining the rest of the team in the expo hall to record mini interviews with all of you in booth 512. We also can't wait to eat, drink, network, and make new memories with all of you, our friends and colleagues. So make sure you say hi at the Midwest Arts Expo in Indianapolis.
Hello and welcome to There's No Business Like, a podcast where friends and industry colleagues explore topics and interview leaders in our industry of professional theatrical touring.
Hello and welcome to There's No Business Like. This week, we're bringing you part 2 of my conversation with Colleen Jennings-Roggensack. And if you haven't had a chance to listen to part 1 yet, I recommend starting there. That was last week's episode. I'm Brian Zelmer from KU Presents and Kutztown University. And as always, I'm joined with my friends, Katie.
Hi, everyone. Katie Miller with Michigan Maven Creative Associates in Midland, Michigan.
Danielle.
Hey, it's Danielle Van Hook from the Alden in McLean, Virginia.
Josh.
Josh Benson rocking it from Marion, Illinois at the Marion Cultural and Civic Center.
And Kevin.
Kevin Maynard, Quad City Arts, splitting the border between Iowa and Illinois.
So as always, I want to start with a question for all of you. Have you ever taken a young child to a professional performance? And how did that go?
Well, I have, and which might be surprising as I don't have kids, but I took my nephew and my niece to see a juggler at a public library that was on our Visiting Artist series. I think at the time, Owen was 4 years old or right about that. He watched the juggler and we were probably 6 feet from the guy. But every time he did something that wasn't traditionally juggling, my nephew Owen would look at me and go, "That's not juggling." And I was like, shh. Every single time he would do something, he goes, "That's not juggling." And then at one point he goes, "It's good, but it's not juggling." And I was like, he can hear you. 100% he can hear you.
It's quite the critic there, Kevin.
Yeah. But I will say, even after that experience, I still have taken him to a number of performances.
Kevin, I also have a story about a juggler. So just within this last season, I took my son Leo, who's 5 at the time, to see a juggler that was the kind of the history of juggling and the science of juggling mixed in with, the actual art of juggling. Because the show, starts at 7:30. It's pretty late for a 5-year-old. I thought, we're going to give it a shot. If we can make it through 45 minutes, I'll be happy. We bring snacks. We sit in the way back. There was a couple in front of us that was really not happy because we had to get up and go to the bathroom once during the course of the show. And he was a little wiggly, but I figured it was because he was tired. But then later this summer, after I left the center and talking about, my new job and whatever, Leo goes, "But we're still going to go see shows at your old work, right?" And I said, "Yes, of course. We'll go see plenty of shows." He goes, "But not the juggler. I never want to see that juggler again." Yeah, I guess juggling is just not his thing.
Like many of us, because we're part of theaters. My daughter's been coming to shows since she was 2, and I think the first one was a Nutcracker. We have a production booth that's soundproof that is where we started taking her from a very young age to where she had snacks and she had coloring books and she had all kinds of stuff that she could do during the show. With that, she's been coming from a very young age with a space crafted and curated to facilitate someone of her age being at something like the ballet without disturbing people. But in turn, she's also become very opinionated from a very young age. Big surprise as to what she actually wants to see. I don't know about, her being a critic of juggling or not, but
I was going to ask, I was wondering where she falls on that. So
I've taken my kids to see some of the shows we've brought into the theater as well. But the first time we took them to see a show, I was just so excited to bring them into the theater. And it was our TD was a little nervous just about young kids and equipment and all this stuff going on. But one of my kids was just taken by looking at the lights hanging from the ceiling, and he just kept pointing them out. Even during the show, it was like, oh, the lights on, and was just really into it. And she noticed how into the lights he was, and she's a lighting designer. And over the summer, the same kid came, and he was my intern, quote unquote, for a couple of hours. And she invited me up because she had the lift on stage and thought that he would really enjoy watching the lift go up and down. And so we did this like full circle thing from like somebody who's like really not sure about a kid in the moment to like, let me show you how the lift works.
Thanks for sharing, everybody. And we'll get to my story in the interview with Colleen. Colleen and I talk about bringing our kids when they were very young to a professional theater experience. And I hope you enjoy it, as well as many of the other things that she has to say. And we'll talk to you on the other side. We talked offline about your work in the EDIA space. You have significant amount of history and experience working in the human rights, justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion spaces. And in particular, I'd like to start, if we can, is you're involved with Black Theater United, and you were part of helping develop a new deal for theater industry standards regarding EDIA. Do you mind just talking about that?
First of all, the shout out goes to Black Theater United. And many things happened in light of George Floyd's murder. And many groups came forward and said, what are we doing? How are we recognizing that everyone should be included? Everything should happen. And so a group of Broadway Black artists who are really all Broadway royalty, Brian Stokes Mitchell, LaShawns, Natasha Williams, Norm Lewis, Tamara Toomey, Wendell Pierce. These are all people you go, oh yeah, you look at their faces, you go, I know you. And, Audra McDonald, the queen. And so everyone in that group got together and said, what are the issues facing us as Black performers on Broadway? And there was a whole list of things. And they said, well, we should have conversations with the leadership of Broadway, which I got to be a part of that group that came in. And it included Bob Wankel from the Schubert, Jimmy Nederlander Sr. and Nick Scandalius from Nederlanders, Jordan Roth from Jew Jamson, Lauren Reed from the John Gore Organization, Charlotte St. Martin, who is the CEO at the time of the Broadway League. So we met for over a year, and we met very quietly. There was no publicity about it, and was very intentionally quietly. So we could talk about, these are the issues, how do we resolve them, and then how are we committed to them? And out of that came the New Deal. And the New Deal talked about, making sure you have diversified creative teams, making sure, as complex as that is, and as simple as you have a hairdresser, no one who can do Black hair, doesn't make any sense. You have a crew, and your crew is monolithic looking, doesn't make any sense. So there are all of those things. And when you read the New Deal, and I would advise everyone to do it, go to BTU, Black Theater United, the New Deal is on there, or just type up the New Deal and it will come up. There are things that are common courtesies. So you come backstage, you've loaded in a show, you're an artist coming in, and the crew backstage have untoward posters on the wall or negative images. And a lot of people don't think about it. Like you and I intentionally spend time backstage to even see what's hanging up back there. And then what's going on? It's like, whoa, that needs to come down. But we also have said, here's what needs to go up. Here's to say we are welcoming. We have a commitment of inclusion. Here are our core values. And it's not just out in front or in a program. It's in the dressing rooms. It's in the loading dock. It's like everyone makes an agreement. And we even say to our patrons, you're coming to the theater. You've made an agreement to embrace behavioral expectations. And so that's an important thing. So the New Deal came out of those things that I was really committed to being a part of that. We have a diversity summit coming up at New York University Law School. And the New York University has a center of belonging It has several words in it, but belonging is the key word in that center. And Kenji Yoshi and David Glasgow are working at sort of shepherding us through the processes and the things that we're doing. So that's just one of those things. The Broadway League, we had for many, many years, I served on the Broadway League, and I was the only person of color, like for a long time, and the board of directors. And then we said, we're going to make this commitment, which was also part of the New Deal of what do our boards look like? And we've diversified our board. And so that's been joyous and great.
About what time frame was that? Did that happen?
This was all following George Floyd's murder.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So I think it made a lot of people sort of open their eyes and say, wait a second. At the same time, we, in our inter-industry committee, we have town halls and we have our diversity, equity, and inclusion programming. We hired a diversity and equity inclusion director. And many of us who are committed in our own theaters have DEI directors and who are looking at work. A lot of the companies now, a lot of the Broadway houses, we've always had many universities. We've always had commitments at universities, but we are working on programs called To Be Welcoming and how people feel welcomed into a space. And whether that's artists or patrons, whether that's staff or our volunteers, how do people feel welcomed into a space, that you belong in a space? I mentor a lot of young people, and I mentor a lot of young people of color, and just say, look, someone opened a door for me. And actually it was interesting. My dear mentor, Sheldon Stanville, who was a white man, is no longer with us, but there were no Black women in these positions. There were no Asian women. There were no Latinx women. And so I mentor, in particular, a lot of women, but also young men as well, to say, someone opened a door for me and said, stand on my shoulders. And I'm doing the same thing. It's my responsibility. It's my joyful responsibility.
Love that. I admit that I hate to use the word woke because so many people put such a negative connotation on that politically and dividing. It's stupid. But in the sense of the definition of the word, I essentially was, sleepwalking until the George Floyd and all of the racial reckoning that occurred during the pandemic. And that's when I started my purposeful journey on learning deeply and trying to embed that into all the work that I do. And of course, it's only been a few years for me, so I get things wrong. But I do know one of the first things that I experienced, of course, when I realized was white guilt, a tremendous amount of white guilt. And then luckily someone pointed out to me, it's like, well, if you wallow there, you're going to be you're making it all about yourself. It's like, okay, you realize these things are wrong now. Let's do something about it and start using your position and your abilities to make things better. And so I'm just on that process now. So I apologize if I ask something incorrectly No,
okay. Here's what I believe, Brian. I don't believe you call people out. You call people in. So do we all say things at time and go, oh my gosh, what that came out of my mouth? What was I thinking? That it doesn't matter who you are and what you look like. There's going to be a moment when you say something and you go, what? And so I believe, again, I don't call people out. I call people in. I go, let's figure out how we go in. Let's think about what we're doing and how we call each other in.
I love that. But I just, if I can ask you, as a white ally, as I see myself and others, consider themselves that, what are the things that we're doing that we think we're helping, but we're actually doing more harm?
Well, first of all, I don't believe in allies. I believe in co-conspirators.
See, right away, I'm getting it wrong. Co-conspirators.
You have skin in the game. You're in the game. So I think part of it just goes back to, my three questions. What do you want? What do I want? What do we want together? Can't be all about what I want. It has to be, what do we want together to make that happen? So I think that's how those discussions begin. I also have found that I ask people, what do they want to be called? If I am going to refer to you or to a group, and I'm sitting with a group, and I will use the term Native Americans. We have 22 sovereign nations in Arizona, 22 sovereign nations. And one of the biggest sovereign nations is the Navajo. Some of the members who I work with in the different sovereign nations say, we're not Native Americans, we're Indians. I was like, ooh, you're Indians. Okay. So I always ask someone, and we have a large Latin A population here, 67%, which are predominantly Mexican Americans. And so some of my colleagues will say, well, use the word Hispanic, Latino. They don't use Chicano. That's very California. And even Latin A, Latin X, and you just have to ask people, tell me what you want to be called. And someone's name, and names are really important. Please tell me how you pronounce your name. And there's a really good friend who did all the legal work for Disney, is now doing some other things for Universal. But her name, she was African American and Japanese, and people called her Nala. And I looked at the spelling of her name and I said, how do you pronounce your name? She said, it's actually Naila. And I go, then why does everybody else call you Nala?
Wow.
Because I let them. And I said, well, we're going to stop that right now. The director of professional development and membership at the league, when you look at her name, the anglicized pronunciation is Diana, and people call her Diana. And I said, what is your name? She said, it's Diana. So I always call her Diana. And then sometimes we learn, they go, wait, what's her name? I said, it's Diana. Even though we look at it and say, oh, Diana. I said, no, it's Diana. I said, so my goal is to call you by your name. As simple as that. As simple as that. And then we get into complex things, and then we just have to swim our way through it, fight our way through it, have our discussions and say, I don't understand that, or why is that like that? Or, so that we're able to do that.
I'm also conflicted and curious about, I noticed in my training sessions and things, there's been some debate about acknowledging progress. And it seems, and this is just my anecdotal experience, nothing scientific, but in my experience, it seems like the younger generation doesn't want to acknowledge there's been any progress, or just, and I'm not sure why. I'm not trying to subscribe what they're thinking or reason behind it, but I've spoken to some older folks who talk and say, no, we've come a long way. It's not to say we're done, but we definitely have come a long way. And they, in some of those discussions, they talk about how it's a disservice to the people that did some hard work at different times by not acknowledging the progress. I just want to try to understand both of those. And I don't know if you have the answer either, because I'm not trying to put all the questions, of a group on you.
No. I would say from discussions with my daughter, she's a millennial, but she's on that, whatever the next group is that's coming up on that curve. And partly is the younger generations will have different experiences and will look at things differently. Like I know in my conversations with even our students and our graduate students and our young people is that there's a recognition of a multiplicity of races that my generation, and definitely the generation before me, didn't deal with. You're either Black or you're not. So understanding that, and also understanding progress is from your perspective. So if you've only been alive 20 plus years, you think, well, that's not a lot of progress. But yet you know that heavy lifting was done before you, and there's a respect and an honor that you pay to your elders. You know that, but you didn't live it.
There is that, and I don't want to push, but the people, the young folks that I heard that I'm speaking about actually talk about those elders that I feel did a lot of work, and some of them even put their lives on the line to make some changes. They say that they failed, like they've gone as far as say, oh, they failed because look where we are and we haven't made. And that's where I'm like, I can't agree with that.
And I think everyone has their own goals and their own expectations. We have come a ways, but we still have a long ways to go. And I think, as Dr. King said, the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. So this is a journey. We're not going to wake up and go, oh, we're in post-racial America. Like, what is that? We're not going to do that. But we know that we are moving in a direction. And whatever, there's a great T-shirt out that I've been meaning to buy when I've seen it on Instagram. And it says, "Dear ancestors, I understand the assignment. I understand the assignment." So I know that you did this. I know you were watching over me. I know you, but I understand the assignment. I get it. I understand it. And so I think that's like the best way to look at it. The ancestors have given us an assignment. We know what we need to do. And then one day we will be ancestors and we will have passed the assignment on. And one day maybe there won't be a need for an assignment, but we're not there yet. I think artists have a great way of discussing and actualizing this and actually giving us platforms to have difficult discussions. When I was at Dartmouth running the Hopkins Center, we brought in Atal Fugard, and it was at the time that apartheid had not happened. Apartheid had not come to an end yet. And we were having tremendous issues at Dartmouth, and students had built shanties on the green, and they were named Bilko, and they were named Mandela. And then the Dartmouth Review, which was a conservative newspaper started by William Buckley, the students came in the middle of the night with sledgehammers and knocked down those shanties. And there were Dartmouth students in those shanties. So the college closed its doors, and the college had never closed its doors. You know, Dartmouth was a college before the country was a country. It didn't close its doors during the Civil War, World War I, World War II, Vietnam, Korea. It never did, but it did. So we as a community knew we had to sit down and talk to each other. And how do we talk to each other? And I met with our then president and said, art is one of those ways to do that. So we brought in Atal Fugard as a Montgomery Fellow, and it's a long-term residency to stay. And then I brought in a Black theater women's group called Vizu Sezwi. And they did a piece called You Strike the Woman, You Strike the Rock. And it was about everyday life under apartheid for Black women. And it was required for everyone to see the work, whether it was in the theater, or we did it in the res life areas, or we did it in chapel. We did it, and we just performed it everywhere. And the conversation was about the piece, not about, I believe in apartheid, I believe we should get rid of our. No, it's like, this is what we're going to talk about. And so you could actually have people in a room who are diametrically opposed in what they believe in, discussing a work and bringing those discussions head to head without saying, I believe you believe, but rather, look at this work. Let's talk about this work. And I believe it really made a difference for Dartmouth. Artists performing is an absolute way to have a discussion through these murky waters that we have waded into and how we get to them.
You mentioned Martin Luther King Jr. a little bit ago, and I know that you took over a day of service at ASU.
Oh, yes. So the celebration of Dr. King's life is one ASU has been doing long before I was even born. I mean, ASU recognized Dr. King and the importance of Dr. King. So when I came here 30 years ago, I went to the day that honored Dr. King. And when I got there, it was like dried pastries, coffee. And I go, what is this? And they said, this is honoring Dr. King. I went, not really.
Wow.
And so the president said, okay, can you just take this over for a couple of years and show us, what does it mean to honor Dr. King? Well, that was almost 20 plus years ago, and I'm still in charge of that committee. And now what we do is we do a year-long celebration of the tenets of Dr. King. We work with all of the public schools across the state. We have a program called Servant Leadership. They actualize servant leadership in writing, in visual arts, in interdisciplinary media. We host a big breakfast close to Dr. King's birthday. We have all of K through 12 comes principals, teachers, parents, and we recognize their work. We give out scholarships. We give out monies. We were giving savings bonds, but now we give out scholarships for those young people. And we bring in leaders that we recognize. We recognize a servant leader in the community that's a community servant leader. And it's ranged from Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who was in our community for a while and wow. worked with a basketball team at the White Rock Native American Reservation. We recognized our award-winning chef Saldana, and she is Mexican-American, and her work in making sure during the pandemic that everyone got to eat, that she cooked food, that she promoted Mexican culture, that it's a number of things. We also honor a faculty member who's done work. We honored Dr. Jeffrey Wilson for his commitment to the LIFT initiative, and he's from the Associate Dean of the Business School. We honor an ASU student. And we've had students that we have honored that have done things from helping Ebola-stricken countries in Africa through work there, creating in our communities free dental service. We had one of the students we honored created a program. He himself was a foster child. And when you get out of foster care, you're just like out in the world by yourself and there's no backup. We did that. So we now do this thing. And then each of the campuses do different things. There's a peace luncheon. There's a March on West at our West campus where Charles St. Clair does Dr. King's speech, and all of the local junior highs study civil rights, and they come marching in with their protest signs and things. We do that every year. And then we have a day of service, and everyone, faculty, staff, and students, and whether it's cleaning up canals, planting trees, building libraries in underserved schools, we have a day of service. So now we have this very large, amazing thing that happens all year long with representatives of, students and faculty and staff from all of our campuses. But it went from like, why this is not celebrating Dr. King to we are living Dr. King's tenets.
That's amazing.
We believe in it. And we just celebrated our 60th anniversary of when Dr. King was here, the only time he was in the state of Arizona. He was at ASU, and President Homer Durham had him come and speak, which was a dangerous, important thing at the time. Mm-hmm. So when we think about those who came before us and what kind of actions. So ASU has always been on the forefront of those things. So yes, and it's one of the things I love doing. And when you see a 5-year-old say, my servant leader is my grandma. My grandma works in soup kitchens, or my servant leader is my teacher, because my teacher makes sure everyone in class is treated fairly. You just burst into tears. You just go, That's amazing. My God. And here are these little ones, and they've done their work, and the schools from across the state. It's a great celebration. Dr. King would be very proud.
I have a time machine, Colleen, and I'd like to bring you back right now and visit a very young Colleen who's just getting her master's degree at Colorado State University.
Yes.
I'm just curious, what advice or encouragement would you, if you had a chance to tell that Colleen, what would you say to her?
You must always stick to your principles, because in the end, it's going to be okay. I would say when you have challenges in front of you, do not panic or do not go into whatever is the easiest and next solution. And one of the things is one of my very first jobs at Colorado State, I was a program coordinator, and the oil market bottomed out and my job was eliminated.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was offered other jobs at the university, and I went, but that's not what I want to do. Mm-hmm. And then my parents were like, come home, we want to have you. And I go, no, that's not what I want to do. I want to take this moment and figure out what I'm truly dedicated to, look around. And I had the luxury of having other skill sets, like I taught dance and I did a number of other things. So I wasn't like starving to death, that I could do that. And it sort of led me on the right path. But at the time I was terrified. I was like, oh no. Well, I had a job I loved. I would have stayed. I would have been at Colorado State the rest of my life. I loved it so much. I loved Fort Collins. I loved being there. I had a dance company. I was really happy to be there. And it was the best thing. I would tell people it's the best thing to be kicked out of the nest. Once you get juicy and comfortable, it's the best thing to like be turned upside down and shaken and go, oh, okay, I think I'm destined for something else.
And talking about getting kicked out of the nest, I know you're very proud of your daughter. She's your hero.
Yes, she is my hero. She's my hero.
Way early in this conversation, we talked about how your parents brought you at 5 years old to a professional concert. You told a story once about bringing your daughter when she was only 3 to a Broadway. I think it was her first Broadway musical.
Yes, her first Broadway musical.
I relate to that because I have children too. And my daughter went to Lincoln Center to see her first ballet around age 3. And I remember the seasoned subscribers that were in front of me, giving us dirty looks before the show started. And then they even said something to my wife and just, but she was a perfect angel the whole time. And they actually made noise during the show, which is ironic.
Right.
I know from the story that your daughter was great at the show.
She was wonderful. And it was real Will Rogers Follies. And literally my subscribers looked at her and looked at me and they had that, oh, really? She was so good. At intermission, they turned to me and went, oh my God, she is better than everybody else was sitting around her. And I said, right. I said, but she's also my canary in the mine shaft. So we'll go and see stuff and she'll look at me and go, when she was a little thing, and she'd go, And I realized it wasn't holding her attention. And it wasn't that it had to be childlike. Like one of her favorite, I think she was like 7 or 8, and she went to see Philip Glass. We had Philip Glass performing. And she'd been backstage with him. She played a little piano for him, and she just loved his work. Merce Cunningham. Merce was still alive, and we did one. Merce actually moved in this from one of the final performances of his life. And then she went backstage and said, okay, Merce, I have a couple things I need to ask you about. Looking at her, he's like, she's your daughter, isn't she? I said, oh, yes. So I always tell people, please bring your children and set them up for success. If it's their first show, sit on the aisle so that you're able to like get up, bring them a treat. Buy them a treat, even better, but bring them a treat. And so they have a little treat to do. But I never shied away, whether it was, a big, beautiful Broadway show like A Lion King, or a series of MacDowell concertos, piano concertos. She would sit there. She was really good. She really understood the work, but I talked about it beforehand. I said, this is what we're going to go and see. This is what will happen. This is when we'll get a break. This is, and I was fortunate enough that she would always go backstage and meet the artist. So this is who will be playing for us. Leonard Slatkin, who was the head of the National Symphony. We went back and she met with Leonard and she goes, Mommy, he has cartoons. So she watched cartoons with Leonard. And then we came out to listen to the symphony. Yeah. So I always think I want to see children all the time. Now, sometimes I always want to know that parents have paid attention to what we've said is going to happen in this show, because I get a little nervous. And I generally, if I see someone with a child, I walk down, I say, so have you read what this is about and informed your child? And they said, yeah. And I said, okay, good. Because I don't want to dissuade. I just want to make sure or you don't go, oh my goodness, I didn't know that was going to happen. And there's sometimes things take you by surprise. I did a wonderful piece with Pina Bausch, and I loved Pina and miss her to this day. And it was called Nor Do, a piece we commissioned, but there's also nudity in it. And I always had Kelsey bring friends, and I said, I'm going to meet with all the parents and talk with them about what's going to happen here. And I had the conversation with the parents, and Kelsey was with me, and I said, and there will be nudity. And then one parent said, oh my God, nudity. And Kelsey said, when it's on the stage, they're not naked. It's art. Okay, our kids can go. And the kids didn't come home and say, oh my God, there's nudity. They came home and said there was a big whale on the stage. And then they're like, a kid's mind is that. But I've had a couple times where I've said to parents now, do you understand what's going to happen? And does your child understand? And they go, yes, we do. But on the flip side, where I think there's no way anyone could be upset about this, we had a mother who had a teenager, a 16-year-old, write the president and say, what a disgusting display on the stage. And how could she explain that she had to cover her 16-year-old eyes? What do you think that piece was? It was Mamma Mia.
What?
No, my president called me and goes,
I was not expecting that.
He goes, is something different happened in Mamma Mia? I said, no. And who is that woman? And that poor child. And but then I still wrote and said, I'm really sorry that you didn't understand the nature of the work. It's Mamma Mia. And, but it was Mamma Mia. So sometimes you can never take for granted what people can become upset about.
So just to complete the family, you mentioned your husband's a volcanologist before.
Yes.
And I heard you talk about, I don't remember where it was, but I saw you on an interview one time talk about some study. You found more scientists attend shows than professional artists.
Right.
And it makes sense because the artists are busy working the same time the shows are happening. But I wonder, that's probably true with many, not just scientists, but many different fields. Does that maybe make us rethink about our marketing approach?
Well, I think it's really fascinating because I just mentioned Pina Bausch. Pina Bausch was one of those artists who we had do Nordu, and we did Nelkin, and we did Cafe Mueller. We did a number of pieces with Pina. And the people who came, particularly from the faculty, were all science people. And they were all just amazed and mystified by Pina. Pina was also one of those artists that our sovereign nations really loved. And she actually went and stayed with our Navajo sovereign nation. Like, she just left and went to do that. That's a whole nother story that we can talk about. But I think scientists are very curious people. So they're curious about a lot of things. So it opens the door. I love all of our arts faculty and all of our art students, but they are busy doing work. They're busy preparing for juries, having our own light opera do things, our theater company do things, our dance companies. Now, what's been great is we've been able to do all of our master classes and things with all of our performance students and have the artists go there. And most cases, they come, we do a noontime brown bag, they come there, and then many of them try to come to the evening performance. But again, they're performing. Whereas we do our open discussions and a number of things and invite the business school or invite the engineering school. We work with our athletic director, our now former athletic director, Ray Anderson, and our First Lady of Athletics, Buffy Anderson. And Buffy came and said, I want to do a program with our athletes. What can we do? Because of Ray and Buffy, we sat down and talked, and we have a program that's called the Senior Cultural Experience. So every senior athlete comes to a cultural experience. And whether it was Hamilton, whether we did a premiere of a film, they all come, and all the seniors. So our goal is no athlete graduates from ASU, no student athlete, without having been at a cultural experience.
That's
and
amazing.
They love it. We shouldn't put people in silos and say, oh, well, they can't be interested in this, when they absolutely might be, or can be, or should be, and find those partnerships. So athletics has been a big partnership. And again, Ray Anderson, who was our athletic director, was a real big proponent.
Are there any key things, again, thinking about the young person or the new to the industry person, that is probably important to lift up that we didn't even get to right now?
Well, one of the things we sort of scratched the surface on was passion. And you must have a passion. Passion gets you up in the morning. A job title, salary, that doesn't get you up in the morning. Because there are some mornings you go, oh, it's going to be hard today. Passion, 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 very important. Understand that the work we do is a way that our communities thrive and they grow, and that it's important work. And it may not be brain surgery, but it is spirit and soul surgery. And it's really important that we are good at that. And also, I tell young people when I talk to them, this is your job. I am merely warming this seat. It's really for you. So don't look out there and think, oh, no, I'll never be able to do that. And I'll tell you one last story. Lovely Katie Andrews came to me when she was 10 years old and said, I want to do what you do. And so she said, can I have a meeting with you? So her mother brought her to my office. We sat down and we talked. And I said, from now until you go on with your life, Katie, you're going to let me know and we're going to talk. Katie went on to American University. I called her and said, Katie, we're coming with the Broadway League for our first big political advocacy group. Would you like to be a gopher? Seriously? And she said yes, and brought 2 more friends. And then she said, I want to meet the women producers. So it was Margot Lyons and Nina Lannon, I can't think of the third one, Barbara Whitman. And I introduced them. Katie came to New York. She said, I help me think about a job. And I said, I know an internship you could have. She had this internship. And then her first job, Barry Grove was the executive director of Manhattan Theater Club, Samuel Friedman. And he said, I need to hire an assistant company manager. And I said, Katie's great. She's young, but she's really terrific. Katie got that job. His company manager left, and he called me and he said, I'm looking for another company manager. I said, hire Katie. He said, she's so young. I said, hire Katie. He said, no. So he hired someone else who then got a gig at a bigger Broadway theater and left without 6 months. He looked at me and he said, I'm going to hire Katie. 3 years later, he said, oh my gosh, she's a genius. I said, yeah, amazing. She went on to do a Broadway work. We were just doing this Prima Facie. And that producer said, Colleen, I want you to meet our company manager. And I went, Katie. And Katie, and he went, how do you know Katie? I said, I've known her since she was 10 years old and she wanted to do this work. And he went, what? All you have to do is believe and support them and know that someone is looking to you to carry them forward on your journey. And that's part of the work we do. And that's the joy of the work that we do.
Thank you for taking this time, Colleen. And I always end my interviews with this last question. What is it that you love most about working in this industry today?
Today, I love the fact that I can watch a work start from a table read to fruition. I can watch a work to go, oh my gosh, that's like crazy. Those people are doing that. And then they flip it on its head and it becomes something magical. I like the fact that I can have a young person who came to work for me at the base level who's now running their own theater, is now the boss. Those are the things I love about the work today. And I love the fact that I am in a community that is committed. I love the fact that I am at a university where I have a visionary president, Michael Crow, who understands the power of this work and the importance of it. That's what I love today.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And I hope this will be shared with lots of people. And I hope you will give me the opportunity to figure out how I could share it with even more.
Absolutely. I will email you that. Thanks for speaking with me, Colleen. It was an honor speaking with you. And I learned a lot. And I hope we get to talk some more in the future.
I hope this is the beginning of a long and beautiful friendship. Thanks, Brian.
Brian, I'm so glad that we split this episode into two because Colleen does have so much wisdom and so much experience to share. So I'm glad we all get to hear everything that she has to offer. Kind of how we opened the show today, talking about bringing kids to the theater. I love the conversation that you had about bringing young children to the theater and the opportunities that it creates for families to experience art together and for children to experience different art forms and have that experience from a young age. It made me think, though, about the tension that there is between patron responsibility to prepare themselves and their children to attend a show and venue responsibility and providing resources and information. I think a lot of times when people are unhappy, it's because they haven't done their due diligence and they haven't read what we have provided as a venue and haven't done their own research. So it just makes me think about how do we message that better? How do we create more resources and make those available, like social stories, for instance, across a wide variety of performing arts experiences, not particularly just those that are specifically for children, for instance. I was really surprised that these parents that she talked about were like, oh, yeah, we've talked to our kids. That hasn't been my experience, that people actually talk to their kids before bringing them to the theater. So good on them. And I'm glad that they did. But as administrators, it's something that we're constantly working on.
Yeah, Katie, I think that's a really great point. I love the idea of creating more social stories about like what to expect when you're going to the theater, because from experience, I really enjoy when I'm in a new city or going to a new venue where I arrive knowing what to expect. Not maybe from the show, but just in general from, what I need to do when I get there and like all those things that go into seeing a performance.
So what I love about her philosophy on bringing children to programming is that it's bringing children to all programming and to not just focused on family programming. And that it really is appropriate for anyone if you prepare the children correctly.
So another part of this conversation we had with Colleen that is really going to stick with me is when she was talking about the social problems they were having on the Dartmouth campus and how she went to the president at the time and said, art can fix this. I'm sure there's a lot of other things that were going on around that. But, kind of calling back to the beginning of the episode of like, we as arts practitioners and administrators, we need to be at every table. And I think that this story really highlights why that is the case, because the idea of bringing in a show everybody on the campus is going to watch and is going to have a moderated reflection on to keep the discussion about the show rather than their political beliefs or what's happening around us, I think is a really clear way in how art builds empathy. And how if we can experience something through somebody else's eyes or through somebody else's story, it helps us understand our real world a lot better.
I really appreciated Colleen allowing me to have a conversation about EDIA with her. And I loved the fact that I screwed up right away when she's talking about calling people in. And it just, it was a humbling experience, but that was fine. You have it, you move on, you learn from it. And I just, again, appreciate Colleen just showing grace to me.
I appreciate that her taking her time to really talk about this, and also just the work that she has done in that space. One of the things I really like, especially about the beginning of this episode, is that she breaks down a little bit about what's in the New Deal, but also, some real world ways that we can make our own spaces more inclusive right off the bat. And, I sometimes having the courage to have that conversation and publicly, like, these are conversations that I think we all as a group here feel comfortable having, but not always, on the microphone, because, you sometimes can feel the opportunity to maybe say something wrong. But I appreciate Colleen taking the moment to have that conversation with you as well.
Well, and there were two things that sort of really stood out to me in that part of your conversation. First was the need for this sort of work to touch every part of our organization. Like, she talked about going backstage and making sure the backstage spaces were welcoming and inclusive as well, right? And so I think a lot of times we focus on this work and sort of like the front office, right? The administrative side of things, but we don't think about our food and beverage staff team members. We don't think about our technicians. We don't think about our ticket office, but those individuals are also interacting with our artists and patrons on a regular basis, and they need to be part of the conversation as well. And so, I was thinking a lot about, like, particularly with small organizations, how do you have the dedication to that training, to those conversations, to making sure every part of your organization is a part of it when you have limited resources, you have limited people, you have limited time. And I think figuring out how to have someone dedicate at least part of their time to keeping that a focus is key to keeping this work moving forward and not forgetting about it and not letting it fall to the side. And the other part of it was the need to teach young people history, accurate history. Your conversation about young people that are saying, oh, we haven't made enough progress, right? Or there hasn't been any progress made. Like, I understand that perspective. Like, I do, because their experience is different. But my question was, like, why do they think no progress has been made? Yes, their lived experience is different, but have they been taught the history of where we've come from, what has been done, and what has brought us to this current moment, so they understand the context of what their experience is today? Like she said, the arc of history is long and it bends towards justice, right? People are people, and we have so many things that we're concerned about, and that tends to get in the way of these very important movements and very important things that we need to change. So I don't know. It gave me a lot of pause and a lot of things to think about. And I really do appreciate the time that you took to have that conversation.
Kind of going off of that, Katie, a lot of times we want to think, like, how do we program this, or how do we do one thing and it's going to affect change for a lot of people? But so much of this work happens on an individual basis, where whenever we meet somebody who is from a background that's not ours, the things like, how should I reference you or your community? How do you pronounce your name? All of those things matter. They're not necessarily what is going, to get us to post-racial America. But if we're not doing those things on a daily basis, and we're not being an example to other people to remind them to say their pronouns, or to do these things that go a long way in building that welcoming environment, then we're not going to get there. And, building those things into the way that we interact with people is free, and is a way that you keep the conversation happening, even if it's not actually happening, but it's keeping the ideas that we've learned in a lot of these trainings that we know are right, that we want to do, a little bit more at the forefront, so that whenever we are making a choice about, like, what kind of doors are we going to put in, and we decide, like, yeah, we are going to spend a little bit more money so that they're more accessible, right? Because, like, that the conversation and the ideas about a more equitable future have been just sort of ingrained in our culture.
You also have to have a little bit of a social awareness to be comfortable enough with someone to be able to ask, and to be able to ask their pronouns, and to ask what they want to be called without doing it in a way that makes them feel other from the beginning. If your first thing is how do you pronounce your name, without actually having any conversation prior to that, then you're othering someone from the very beginning and essentially saying you don't belong here and I don't understand you.
Josh, that makes me think of, you ever have the experience where you get into a conversation with somebody and you didn't find out their name or catch their name, and it's like, and then you have conversation after conversation with them, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, this is too long. I should know their name for me to ask, sorry, what's your name?
But how many times though have you been like, okay, I'm going to be honest about this, and just like be like, I'm so sorry. I forget your name and I want to know. And they've been like, oh yeah, I don't remember your name either. Like that's not always the case.
That has never happened to me because I will never admit that. I will die not knowing somebody. Or I'll start asking people like, who is that person? Who was I just talking to?
Have any of you gone on and looked at the new deal?
Yeah, I pulled it up because I hadn't looked at it in a while. So if you haven't looked at it or you haven't looked at it recently, I do recommend going on and just reviewing that. And it's divided up into sections that might be more or less applicable to you and your role. I think it's a good reminder, even though it applies specifically to Broadway in the way that it's written, it has great reminders and great level setting for our own organizations and whatever role that you're in. And those things can be applied to our own venues, our own artistry, or our own tours in a myriad of different ways.
And you can find a link to that in our show notes.
As Katie said, it was designed for Broadway, but it's applicable in so many ways, and it teaches us things that we can use in our everyday centers in life. And I'm so grateful that they put this together and took the time to do that, because it just helps us all do a better job.
So the one last thing that, I just really kind of wanted to bring up again, because I just think is so brilliant, is the way that all senior athletes have to go to a cultural experience. And I love the way she framed a cultural experience, right? They're not saying everybody has to go to musical theater or everybody has to do a dance class. It's that all of the athletes need to do some cultural experience, which can be art or something that's not within sort of what we would consider traditional performing arts. And I think that it's just so smart not to put people in silos and assume that because they're athletes, like they don't have time to do cultural experiences, or they certainly wouldn't want to do something when, we know as humans, people are multidimensional. We see, every day as adults, and Colleen's even talking about how scientists a lot of times are the people who want to go and see the arts more. And I think ingraining that at institutions' policies, as well as people's personal policies, so that they also don't fall in the silo of, well, I'm an athlete, so I certainly can't enjoy the arts, or I can't enjoy cultural things. Start breaking down those binaries of I'm either this or I'm that.
Another thing that stuck out to me was her deep admiration for her daughter, which of course we all love our children, but oh my gosh, the list of things that her daughter has accomplished is just like beyond amazing.
The sense of independence that was fostered in her daughter, and I think a lot of that has to do with like coming with mom to the theater and going to shows and having an example in her parents that you can achieve anything you want to achieve. I think that is a great reminder that like the examples that we're setting as professionals for young people really can have an impact, whether they are our own kids or children in the community or young people in the community. That role modeling is super, super important.
So I want to thank Colleen again for taking so much time to sit down with me. I've been fortunate enough to sit in PD sessions with her, and just every time I'm so in awe and just sit there and absorb what she's teaching. She's just so full of so much wisdom, as Katie said in the beginning of this. And I just feel fortunate anytime I get a chance to speak with her. And the fact that she spent so much time, even though she is so incredibly busy and has such a chock full schedule, she still took all this time to sit and share all of this with us. So thank you, Colleen. And we hope you all got something out of it. I'm sure you did. And we hope you join us next time when we have our 100th episode. Can you guys believe?
Oh my God, 100.
So we'll catch you next time on There's No Business Like.
All right, everyone. Thanks for listening to There's No Business Like. Our producers and hosts are Brian Zelmer, Josh Benson, Kevin Maynard, Katie Miller, and me, Danielle Van Hook. Views expressed in this podcast are ours alone and are not reflective of the organizations we are a part of. keep up with us at nobusinesslike.com. There you'll find links to all of our episodes and socials. If you like this podcast, give us a like, a follow, a review, or our favorite, a 5-star rating. Oh wait, what was that site? I got it, don't worry. It is nobusinesslike.com. Do I sound out bus-I-ness every time I type it? Yep, sure do. Stay in touch, my friends.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to There's No Business Like. I'm Brian Zelmer from Kutztown University, and I am here with my friends, Katie.
Hello, everyone. Katie Miller with Michigan Maven Creative Associates.
Josh.
Josh Benson with Michigan Maven Creative Associates.
Danielle.
Danielle Van Hook from the Alden and McLean.
Wait a minute,
Virginia.
what? Hold on a second.
Oh, you guys didn't know I hired Josh. Like,
Rude.
That's a poor choice. That bar bill's going to be outrageous.